The Innovator Solution: Creating and Sustaining Successful Growth, by Clayton M. Christensen and Michael E. Rayner. Introduction. Have you ever wondered why great companies fail? Not the poorly managed ones, but the titans, the ones at the very top of their game. They have the best people, the most money, the most loyal customers. Yet, time and time again, a small, scrappy upstart comes along and topples them from their throne. It seems to happen so often that you might think it's just the natural, unpredictable cycle of business, a roll of the dice. Consider a company like AT&T. After it was broken up by the government in 1984, it was desperate to find new ways to grow. Management saw that computers and telephones were converging, so they tried to build their own computer division. It lost hundreds of millions. So they decided to bet even bigger, buying the computer giant NCR for over $7 billion in 1991. A few years and a couple $billion in losses later, they sold it for a fraction of what they paid. But they had to grow. So they bought a massive wireless company, Macaw Cellular, for over $11 billion. A few years later, that business was valued at about 2/3 of their investment. Still, they had to grow. So they bet over $100 billion to become the biggest cable operator in the United States, hoping to reinvent local phone service. Just a few years later, they sold those assets for a loss of over $40 billion. In just over a decade, AT&T, a company filled with smart, experienced people, had vaporized tens of billions of dollars trying to create growth. This story isn't unique. Study after study shows that perhaps only one company in 10 manages to sustain profitable growth over the long run. Why is it so incredibly difficult? For years, this question puzzled one of the great business thinkers of our time, a Harvard Business School professor named Clayton M. Christensen. He saw that the common explanations, that managers become lazy or risk-averse, just didn't hold up. The executives at these companies were often betting the farm on huge, risky innovations. His first book, The Innovator's Dilemma, explained the why. It revealed that the very practices that make companies successful, listening to their best customers, focusing on their most profitable products, are the same practices that cause them to miss the next wave of innovation and, ultimately, fail. But that incredible insight led to an even bigger question. If we know why great companies stumble, is there a way to solve the dilemma? Is there a predictable, repeatable formula for creating new, successful growth? That is the bold promise of this book, The Innovator Solution. It's not a book about luck or genius. It's a book about a process. It takes us inside the black box of innovation to show that creating a successful new business isn't a random roll of the dice. It's a science. By the end of our journey today, you will understand the powerful forces that shape success and failure in business. And more importantly, you will have a playbook for how to become the disruptor, not the disrupted. Book summary. To understand the solution, we first need to truly understand the problem. And the problem begins with a simple chart, a mental model that explains so much about the business world. Imagine a graph. Time moves forward along the bottom axis, and performance, how good a product is, goes up the vertical axis. Now, picture a gently sloping dotted line moving up and to the right. This line represents the pace at which customers can actually use or absorb improvements in a product. Think about cars. Automakers keep making faster, more powerful engines, but traffic jams and speed limits mean we can't really use all that extra performance. There's a limit to how much improvement we can absorb. Now, picture another, much steeper solid line on that same graph. This represents the pace at which companies innovate, constantly introducing better and better products to sell for higher prices to their most demanding customers. Do you see the gap? The trajectory of technological progress almost always outstrips the customer's ability to use it. A product that was once not good enough eventually becomes more than good enough for most people. This gap creates the opening for two very different types of innovation. The first is what the author calls sustaining innovation. This is what we typically think of as progress, making a good product better. It could be an incremental improvement or a massive breakthrough, but its purpose is the same: to sell a better product to your best customers for more money. In the race of sustaining innovation, The established, leading companies almost always win. They have the resources, the motivation, and the customers to justify the investment. But there's a second type of innovation, and this is where the magic and the danger lies. It's called disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovations don't try to make better products for existing customers in established markets. Instead, they introduce products that are actually not as good as what's currently available. But they offer other benefits. They are typically simpler, more convenient, and much cheaper. They appeal to entirely new customers who couldn't afford or use the existing products, or they appeal to the least demanding customers at the very bottom of the market. And this is the key. Once a disruptive product gets a foothold in these new or low-end markets, it starts its own relentless journey of improvement. And because that path of improvement is steeper than what mainstream customers can absorb, eventually that not good enough product becomes good enough. And by then, it's too late for the old leaders. The disruptors crush them. Let me tell you a story that makes this crystal clear. It's the story of the American steel industry. For decades, steel was made in massive, billion-dollar factories called integrated mills. These giants did everything, from processing iron ore to rolling out finished steel sheets. In the 1960s, a new, much simpler technology came along: the mini-mill. Mini-mills melted scrap steel in small electric furnaces, and they could make steel of a given quality for about 20% less cost than the giant integrated mills. Now, you'd think every integrated mill would have jumped on this cheaper technology, but not a single one did. Here's why. Because the mini-mills used scrap steel of varying quality, the steel they initially produced wasn't very good. In fact, there was only one market that would buy it: concrete reinforcing bars, or rebar. This was the dirtiest, lowest profit margin business in the entire steel industry. The big integrated mills were actually happy to get rid of the rebar business. It was a dog-eat-dog market. For them, it made perfect sense to focus their investments on higher quality, higher margin steel products for customers like car manufacturers. But for the mini-mills, with their 20% cost advantage, selling rebar was a great business. They made handsome profits, so they attacked the rebar market, and the big mills fled, reconfiguring their factories to make better steel. Eventually, the mini-mills drove every last integrated mill out of the rebar market. Then something predictable happened. With only low-cost mini-mills competing against other low-cost mini-mills, the price of rebar collapsed. The profit disappeared. So what did the mini-mills do? They looked upmarket. The next step up was angle iron, bars, and rods. This market was bigger, and the profit margins were nearly double what they could get in rebar. So, the mini-mills worked hard to improve their quality just enough to make these products. And what did the big integrated mills do? They were relieved to get rid of that business too. Compared to their high-end sheet steel, angle iron was a low-margin commodity. So they fled upmarket again, abandoning the territory to the mini-mills. This exact same pattern repeated itself again, and again, and again. The mini-mills moved from rebar to angle iron, then to structural steel beams, and finally, to high-quality sheet steel, the crown jewel of the big mills. Each step of the way, the big mills made what seemed like the perfectly rational decision: retreat from low-profit markets and focus on your best customers. They were motivated to flee, not fight. And that is the core of the innovator's dilemma, and the heart of the innovator's solution. Disruption works because it's so much easier to beat competitors when they are motivated to run away from you. This powerful force is what the author calls asymmetric motivation. The opportunity that looks tiny and unattractive to a market leader is the golden ticket for a small disruptor. This isn't a story about bad management. It's a story about rational managers making logical decisions that lead their companies right off a cliff. This dynamic explains why it's almost impossible for a new company to win by launching a sustaining innovation, a better product aimed at an established competitor's best customers. If you try to fight that battle, the big incumbent will be motivated to fight back with all its resources, and it will almost certainly win. IBM, Kodak, GE, AT&T, all these giants failed when they tried to outmuscle an entrenched leader on a sustaining trajectory. The companies that beat them, like Canon against Xerox, or PC makers against IBM, didn't do it with a frontal assault. They did it with disruption. So, if you want to create a new growth business, the first and most critical step is to shape your idea into a disruptive strategy. There are two types of disruption you can pursue. The first is what we saw with the mini-mills, a low-end disruption. This is where you target the most overserved customers at the bottom of a market with a good enough product at a lower price. These are customers who are paying for features and performance they don't actually need. A low-end disruption doesn't create a new market. It just serves an existing one more affordably and efficiently. The second type is even more powerful. It's called a new market disruption. This is where you target people who aren't customers at all. You compete against non-consumption. A new market disruption turns non-customers into customers by making a product so much more affordable and simple to use that a whole new population can now own and use it. Think of Sony's first transistor pocket radio in 1955. At the time, radios were beautiful, high-fidelity pieces of furniture made with vacuum tube technology by companies like RCA. The first transistor radio sounded tinny and terrible in comparison. If Sony had tried to sell it to adult audiophiles, they would have been laughed out of the room. But Sony didn't do that. They sold it to teenagers. Teenagers didn't own the expensive tabletop radios. Their alternative was no radio at all. For them, a cheap, portable radio that they could use to listen to rock and roll away from their parents was a miracle. They were delighted with a product that the mainstream market considered inferior. Sony competed against non-consumption. They created a new market in a new context, portability, and the big companies like RCA felt no pain, because Sony wasn't stealing their customers. But, just like the mini-mills, Sony relentlessly improved its technology. They went from pocket radios to portable TVs. And by the time solid-state electronics were good enough to power high-quality home stereos and televisions, RCA and the other vacuum tube giants had simply vaporized. So how do you find these incredible opportunities for disruption? The book reveals that it's not about complex market analysis. It's about a fundamental shift in perspective. It's about understanding the job the customer is trying to get done. This is one of the most powerful ideas in the entire book. We don't just buy products. We hire them to do a job. And that job has functional, social, and emotional dimensions. The book tells a wonderful story about a fast food chain that wanted to sell more milkshakes. They did all the usual market research. They brought in customers who fit the demographic profile of a milkshake buyer and asked them, "How can we make this better? Should it be chocolatier? Cheaper? Chunkier?" They got clear feedback, made the improvements, and nothing happened. Sales didn't change at all. So they brought in a new researcher who took a different approach. He spent a full day in a restaurant simply observing who was buying milkshakes, when they bought them, and what they did with them. He discovered something surprising. Nearly half the milkshakes were sold before 8:30 in the morning. The buyers were almost always alone. They never bought anything else, and they always got in their car and drove away with it. So he went back and interviewed these morning customers. He asked them, "What job were you trying to get done when you came here to hire that milkshake?" It turned out they all had the same job, a long, boring commute to work. They needed something to make the drive more interesting, and something to stave off hunger until lunchtime. What were the milkshake's competitors? From the customer's point of view, it wasn't other milkshakes. It was bagels, but they were messy and left crumbs. It was bananas, but they were eaten too quickly. It was donuts, which didn't last until 10 a.m. A milkshake, it turned out, was the perfect tool for the job. It took a long time to suck through a thin straw. It could be consumed cleanly with one hand, and it was substantial. The parents who bought milkshakes for their kids in the afternoon were hiring it for a completely different job, to be a loving parent and placate a child without a big fight. For that job, the thick, slow milkshake was actually a terrible product, because the kids took forever to finish it. When you segment a market by the job to be done, suddenly the path to innovation becomes clear. To serve the morning commuter better, you'd make the shake even thicker, and maybe add tiny chunks of fruit to make the commute more interesting. For the parent and child job, you'd make a thinner, smaller shake that's quick and easy to finish. Understanding the job is the key to finding both a disruptive foothold and the right path for improvement. But a disruptive product isn't enough. You also need a disruptive business model. This means you have to figure out how to make attractive profits at the discount prices the disruption requires. For low-end disruptions, this is the entire game. For new market disruptions, you need a cost structure that allows you to make money serving a market that was previously considered too small or too poor to be profitable. A disruptive business model is an incredibly valuable asset, because as you move upmarket into higher price tiers, most of that extra price falls straight to your bottom line. This leads to another critical decision. What should your company do itself, and what should it outsource? The common wisdom says focus on your core competence. But the book argues this is a dangerous trap. Think about IBM when it created the first PC. It outsourced the microprocessor to a tiny company called Intel and the operating system to another little company called Microsoft, so it could focus on its core competence of designing and assembling computers. In doing so, it handed over the two most profitable parts of the entire industry to others. So how do you know what to keep in-house? The answer depends on whether your product is not good enough or more than good enough for what customers need. When a product is not good enough, when customers are demanding better performance, you have to build it yourself using a proprietary, interdependent architecture. You need to control every critical component to squeeze out every last bit of performance. This is why the early leaders in cars Ford, computers IBM, and photocopiers Xerox were all highly integrated companies. But once a product becomes more than good enough, once it overshoots what customers can actually use, the basis of competition changes. Now, speed, convenience, and customization become more important than raw performance. In this world, the advantage shifts to companies that use a modular, open architecture. They can mix and match the best components from various suppliers to quickly assemble exactly what a customer wants. This shift from interdependent to modular is what causes commoditization. When anyone can assemble the same standard parts, it becomes impossible to differentiate your product, and profits evaporate. This happened to the PC assemblers. But here's the beautiful part: the law of conservation of attractive profits. When profits disappear at one stage of the value chain, they reappear at another. As PC assembly became a commodity, the components inside the PC, the microprocessor and the operating system, became the place where differentiation and enormous profits were possible. They were the subsystems that were still not good enough. The power to capture profit migrates to whichever part of the value chain is not yet good enough. The secret is to skate to where the money will be, not where it is now. Finally, even with the right strategy, the right customers, and the right business model, a new venture can fail if it's placed in the wrong part of the organization. An organization's capabilities are defined by three things: its resources, people, money, technology, its processes, the ways people work together, and its values, the criteria for setting priorities. A large, successful company has powerful processes and values that are perfectly tuned for sustaining innovation. But those same processes and values are disabilities when it comes to disruption. A disruptive project will always look too small, too low profit, and too distracting compared to the needs of the core business. It will be filtered out by the resource allocation process. This is why an organization cannot disrupt itself. For a disruption to succeed inside a large corporation, it must be housed in a separate, autonomous business unit, with its own cost structure, its own processes, and its own values, a place where a small opportunity can be seen as a big win. Commentary. The Innovator solution is more than just a business book. It's a way of seeing the world. Its lessons extend far beyond the corporate boardroom and can change the way you think about your own career and your own ideas. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the idea that the forces that cause giants to fall are not random acts of fate, but predictable, almost natural laws. And once you understand these laws, you can harness them. This transforms the challenge of innovation from a terrifying leap of faith into a manageable, even predictable process. It tells us that being small and under-resourced isn't a disadvantage in the face of disruption, it's your greatest strength. The large incumbents are trapped by their own success, handcuffed by the very customers and profit models that made them great. You, as the small disruptor, are free. The Jobs to be Done framework is another profound insight. It's a tool for empathy. It forces you to stop thinking about the attributes of your product and start thinking about the progress a customer is trying to make in their life. When you ask, "What job is my customer hiring this product to do?" you unlock a completely new level of understanding. You see competition where you never saw it before, the milkshake competing with a banana, and you see opportunities that are invisible to everyone else. So, how can you start applying these ideas right now? Here are 3 simple actions. First, become an observer of non-consumption. The next time you see a complicated or expensive product or service, don't just think about who is using it. Ask yourself, who isn't using it, and why not? Is it because it's too expensive? Too complicated? Requires a special skill? In that gap, between the current users and the non-users, lies the fertile ground for a new market disruption. Second, start identifying the jobs in your own life. When you buy something, ask yourself what job you hired it to do. When you feel frustrated by a product, it's not the product that's failing. It's that it's failing to do a job properly. These moments of frustration are the seeds of innovation. A product that can solve that job better, more conveniently, or more affordably is a potential business. Third, look for the rebar in any industry. Find an industry dominated by big, successful companies and ask, what is their lowest margin, most annoying business segment? What customers are they secretly happy to get rid of? That is the perfect, undefended beachhead for a low-end disruption. By starting there, you can build a profitable business while the giants happily look the other way, unaware of the threat until it is far too late. In the end, this book is a message of profound optimism. It suggests that the power to create transformative growth and change isn't reserved for a select few with deep pockets and established power. On the contrary, the rules of the game are tilted in favor of the outsider, the newcomer, the one with a simpler, cheaper, more convenient solution for a problem that everyone else is ignoring. That could be you. That was a summary of the Innovator solution by Clayton M. Christensen and Michael E. Rayner. We've explored the core ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. The real magic happens when you actually travel there yourself. The book is filled with stories, details, and nuances that can't be captured in a brief overview. It's in those quiet moments, when a specific example or a simple turn of phrase connects with your own experience in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning a new theory. It's an experience that can fundamentally change how you see the world of business and your own potential within it. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable on your journey to learn from the best minds in business, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep building our wisdom together.